Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and friend, actually not a life coach, but a friend and special arts entrepreneur, Anne-Marie Kanata McEwen, joining you tonight on this Sunday, September the 2nd, 2018. This is our first show of September, 8 p.m. This is your weekend dose of happy, and we hope your weekend's going great because it's Labor Day weekend, and on Labor Day weekend, you get 3 days off, so you have to take advantage of every single day. It's the law. You have to do this. It's not an optional thing. You have to take advantage of this. That is, if you want to be happy and you want to stay on the happy side of life. So, Anne-Marie, I was mentioning before the show that my brain hadn't quite engaged. I think I just proved it with that intro because it was a little bit stumbly, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there. It just takes a few minutes to get going.
It's all good, Walt. It's all good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to start off the show. We normally start off with wins, and we actually hadn't done that too much lately, so I want to try to get back into doing that. But wins, of course, are anything that are going well, that even the little things in life, things that worked out right during the week, something maybe you manifested. It could be almost anything. I wanted to share a win that happened just in the last couple days when I was doing some research, and I can't remember what the context was that I was doing the research, but I wanted to look into how can what things that we can do physically to raise our mood, to get into a happier place, because positive psychology and the research associated with it has been digging up all kinds of interesting stuff over the last 20 years or so about the importance of being happy and what happens when you are, and the things that go right in your life as a result. And it's almost law of attraction, except they don't want to get into anything that woo-woo, so they don't call it that. But but it's basically the same concepts. Right. And one of the things I ran into when I was doing my research is I found an article at the National Institute of Health website. And at that website, this particular article talked about 4 different ways to make yourself happy, essentially. The first one won't surprise any of us who are law of attraction practitioners, because that first one is think positive thoughts. And we say, well, duh, we do that all along.
Right.
But it's nice to know that science is agreeing with us. Number 2 is diet. And diet is actually kind of dicey, believe it or not. There's a lot of popular literature. Yeah, there's a lot of popular literature out there that talks about the value of building up your serotonin. And one of the best ways to build up serotonin naturally in the body is by eating foods that are heavy in tryptophan. So there are a lot of websites and web pages that will recommend going to a diet that has a high level of tryptophan to it, and or at least not necessarily a high level, but a high enough level to build up the serotonin. And they're recommending that as a way to essentially give yourself that boost of serotonin, because serotonin is the happy drug. It's the happy neurotransmitter. It makes us all feel better and so forth. Turns out there's one flaw in it.
Isn't that what's in turkey?
Say, what was that? Turkey? Yeah.
What's in turkey?
Yeah, tryptophan is in turkey. It's in eggs. It's in nuts, and it's in a number of different foods. But there's a catch, it turns out. Because what researchers have found is that all that stuff creates serotonin, all right, but it creates it in the gut. And it turns out that there is some sort of a blood barrier that prevents most of that serotonin from making it to the brain. So the question is, well, how much is it really helping with the happy stuff? Because the happy stuff goes on primarily in the brain. So the researcher was saying, this doesn't mean we should rule out diet. It just means we need some more research to figure out, well, how do we make this thing work? Because what people have been talking about really doesn't build it as much as they think it does. I mean, maybe there's a placebo effect going on. There probably is. But the actual physical improvement that people expect from building their serotonin that way probably isn't going to be as big as they had thought. But anyway, that's the second one to use. And that one is like more to come. That's the way he was selling that one. The third one, another one that doesn't surprise us, is exercise. And that makes a lot of sense. First of all, anyone who has ever exercised to a point of feeling great, well, that's the combination of the serotonin and the dopamine kicking in. And, so we recognize that. That's the runner's high, right? That's the athlete's high. So that one makes sense. And then the fourth one was kind of a surprise to me. The fourth one is bright light, because apparently if you have bright light in your environment, you will be happier. And indeed, some of the studies that have been done to show the validity of this include, we have little background noise going on there. Include over in Europe, in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia, which of course during the winter months gets very, very dark. They have deliberately installed major public centers that are brilliantly lit. And what they found is when people who live in those areas congregate in these brilliantly lit sections of their countries during the winter months, everybody's attitude improves. So that kind of reinforces the idea bright light really does it. And apparently they've even narrowed it down. They say what you want is at least 3,000 lumens of light. Now, to give you kind of a rule of thumb, 600 to 800 lumens of light, that would be like a 60-watt bulb or the modern-day equivalent, not non-incandescent bulb. Something like being out in a cloudy day. Cloudy day is usually going to be about 1,000 to 1,200 lumens. Sunny day is going to be closer to 3,000 lumens, 2,500, something like that. If you're out in blinding sun on snow, like a snowscape that's just all white, that can be as high as like 10,000 lumens. That's why you really, really need the sunglasses in a situation like that. So the idea is you want the equivalent of a bright sunny day. That's how many lumens of light you want. And I thought, well, shoot, I ought to try doing that. So I have gone out today and bought a bunch of high wattage bulbs. The modern equivalents that are they're not actually 100-watt bulbs. They're like 60 or 70 watts or something like that. But they have the illumination of 100-watt bulbs, and I've got them plugged in all of the lamps in my office. And it certainly is a lot brighter in here. So I'm going to be doing an experiment for a while to see, just how much happier it makes me. Because this is something I've been working on. I've been talking with some of the other life coaches here on the podcast. I've been working on doing stuff on my own, and there have been a number of times where I found I just can't get my attitude high enough. And I'm wondering, maybe it's because I've been working in an environment that's just too dark. I don't know.
Interesting. Well, and then there's the other facet of that. You've got to be careful what kind of light, because you really don't want to be under fluorescent lights, because fluorescent lights, that's not good either.
Right.
So it probably depends on also what kind of light. So
yeah, these are the modern soft white types.
Notice that.
No, I agree with you, because the fluorescent, there's something about those lights. I mean, they can be very bright, but they're just cold. They're just not comfortable lights to be in. But the ones that I got are the warmer, soft white type lights. So I'm hoping that also makes a difference.
Good.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good alternative. But yeah, I think anybody would kind of think about that as being common sense, is that light is something that's going to make you feel better, although we kind of forget about it, don't we?
Well, that's just it. I mean, I didn't even give it any thought at all. It just hadn't even occurred to me, geez, maybe I'm just not lighting my environment enough.
Right.
So.
Yeah, well, I know I always feel better in the light, and sometimes I think, I don't need to turn the light on, but then I turn it on and it's like, yeah. It's just like, yeah, put that light on.
I love it. That's great. It's always good to get enthusiastic about stuff. And if turning on a light is a win, then by God, it's a win. That's all there is to it.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's my long-winded win for the weekend.
4.
The 4.
Yep.
The thought, diet, exercise, and light.
And light, yep. Well, sounds good. I mean, obviously, I knew about exercise.
Mm-hmm.
The diet one, that still interests me about the whole serotonin thing. Because to me, what makes me happy about diet? Well, when I know that I'm eating a food or a food group or whatever that is good for me, that makes me happy.
Well, that's good.
So, I'm just happy. When I eat a salad, I'm happy because I know that it's good for my body. I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, especially if I'm chewing 22 times.
Oh,
so
you have dietary rules then.
That makes me happy. Well, they say, there's all these guidelines that they give you for food. They say chew your food well and do this and do that. And so it just makes me happier when I know I'm following it. But I think that's one of the things that I learned about in general from law of attraction, is that you're happy when you're in harmony with your highest self, right? And your highest self knows that eating good food is good for you. So, and to me, it's very important. So I think that it just proves the fact that when I'm doing something that I know is good for me, I'm happy, and I know I'm in alignment with my higher self, and my higher self's happy. So it kind of all works hand in hand.
Well, I think you're right. And really what it comes down to is if it's something that we enjoy, and clearly you take enjoyment from like the good eating habits, for instance, as long as you're enjoying that, I think that's probably the best reason for doing it. Because when you feel good, we know this from basic teaching, right? When you feel good, that's when you attract the best and the most and the quickest too. So, I mean,
Right.
like with Wendy Dillard,
Yeah.
Wendy Dillard has had weight problems most of her life, and she recently just kind of abandoned all the food issue, I mean, not the food issues, the food rules, because they were just bringing her down. So she's abandoned them. She just kind of does a little reading inside, like, okay, is it okay to eat this? Oh, it is. All right, then no, only that amount. Okay, that much. That's her food rule. Just check inside instead of following all the dietary guidelines, because those just drove her nuts. So it really comes down to that. Does it make you feel good? If it makes you feel good, do it. That's the way I look at it. I mean, it made us feel good today. Literally before the podcast, when we were supposed to be having dinner, instead of having dinner, we went out for ice cream. Why? Because it felt good.
So wait a minute, you went out for ice cream before dinner?
We did. We
Good
did.
for you.
We did. We went out for ice
Good
cream
for
before
you.
dinner, and we loved every mouthful of it. It was delicious.
Good for you. That's funny.
See, that's all it comes down to. It comes down to whether or not it feels good, and it has to really feel good. I mean, when people get in trouble with food, what I've noticed is they most often get in trouble with food when they eat food not because they're going to have fun with it, but because they're trying to stuff something else, or there's nothing else to do or whatever, and that's when you really have trouble, I think. But if you're having fun with food, if the food is enjoyable and you're loving the experience and so forth, I don't see how that can possibly be bad. I think it's got to be good. At least that's my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. I think there's the enjoyment factor, absolutely, and I think that it's all in your belief.
Yes.
There's a lot of things to it. Abraham will say, you could be eating, a greasy cheeseburger from some fast food joint, but if you don't think it's a problem, then it's okay. It's like, you've got to agree with whatever you're doing.
And you got to really believe
think
with it.
that it's okay.
You got to feel it deep down. It's not just like talking yourself into it. Oh, I guess this is going to be okay. No. That's not going to cut it, because that's not real enjoyment. That's just like talking myself into something.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, those are my wins. What are your wins for the week? You got anything that's happened lately that's been a nice win for you? Something that felt good, or something that produced a nice result, or anything like that?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is this little tiny thing that happened, but I just had to laugh out loud, and I was in public. But when it happened, I just laughed, and it was just such a little thing.
Yeah, but that counts, though.
You know what I loved about it? I loved the immediacy of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that was, so I was in the grocery store, and I was standing in line at the service counter, and there was this young kid who was walking out the door who worked at Stop and Shop, and he looked over at me and said, "Hey there, miss." And he smiled and waved at me, and I looked at him and waved, and I knew that I had him as a student in a summer camp previously. Nice. Maybe even 2 years ago, but I recognized him, he recognized me, and he waved and said hello. And immediately I thought to myself, gee, I wish I knew that kid's name. And, was able to say that. And almost immediately after that thought, one of the kids in a line, like, a cashier line way down the store, said, "Hey, bye, Davon. See you later." And I was like, "Oh, that's his name. There we go." And then I thought to myself, "Oh, good. Now that I know his name, I hope I see him again." And sure enough, like 10 minutes later, he came back into the store, and I was like, "Hey, Davon, nice to see you." And it was great. I was like, thank you, universe, for giving me that name, because I had totally forgotten it.
It's funny how that happens.
It was just so immediate. I had to laugh.
Yeah. Well, it's great when it happens that way, which proves a couple of things. First of all, that you were in such a great mood about it. Second of all, you had no resistance. Because that's what I've discovered. Right. When stuff shows up really fast, there's no resistance there. And I mean, sometimes it
Right.
can show up. The fastest I've ever had something show up was 1/10 of 1 second. I mean, just like bang, it was done. But even if it's not that quick, there are times when things show up really, really fast. And I know I just wasn't resisting in any way. And if I actually take a little inventory, so to speak, check out what I was feeling, yeah, there was nothing to resist on whatever those circumstances were. That's always the pattern.
Right. 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 And that's that's part of the trick of it all, is having no resistance to it. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's probably the hardest part is having no resistance.
Right?
I mean, that's the law of allowing, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. Yeah. That's actually the thing that Abraham says we have the most to learn about. And I think they're right about that. I think that is the thing we humans have the most to learn about. And we can learn it from animals. Apparently, animals are really good at allowing. They're not so good at the deliberate creation part, but they're great at allowing. It's like we need to share roles with them. We'll do deliberate creation and we'll teach them that, and they'll teach us the allowing part, right?
Right. Right.
Yep.
There you go. Well, I mean, why do they have to have any resistance? They're just following their instinct.
Pretty much. Yeah.
They're just kind of going with the flow all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no fear. They have no worry. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder about that have no fear thing, though, because they have natural fear because of predators and things like that. But I don't think they worry about really anything.
No, they don't worry.
They just sort of let it be.
They're alert. I mean, we have 2 cats, both black cats. In fact, we had one of our neighbors who we had never met before, but we met her tonight. She comes up to us and says, "Oh, are those your cats?" "Yes, they're our cats." "Oh, they're just so adorable." And, they really are. One of them we call the neighborhood ambassador because he goes out and introduces himself to everybody and wants pets and everything like that. So he's very, very friendly. But by the same token, he's very cautious. I mean, he looks out for himself really well. He's very much of an outdoor cat, to the point where he has not been inside since May. He comes in to eat and he goes out. He comes in to eat and goes out twice a day. That's it. That's all we see him.
So he sleeps outside too.
Yeah, he sleeps outside. Yeah, and he loves it out there.
Oh.
In fact, tying back to what we talked about earlier, I'm wondering if part of the reason that he sleeps outside is because he likes being outside because of the light. I wonder if light affects him the same way, and he wants to be out there for that, which kind of reinforces we need to lighten up our house a little bit.
Yep. Well, sounds like you are. So
we are. We're taking the steps. There it is. So anyway, you had come up with the idea of a topic based on what Tom Wells and I had talked about on Friday morning's podcast. And now the context that we had started in with Tom's, with the podcast with Tom was a little bit different. But one of the issues we ended up discussing between the two of us was what I'm going to call who initiates. Is it that we who initiate, or does the universe initiate via the law of attraction? Because there are kind of a couple ways to express what happens when we attract stuff into our lives. One is what I might call the universal manager approach, which is where I just leave everything to the universal manager. The universal manager decides how to get things to me. It kind of knows what I want. It's the universal manager that's doing all the directing. The other viewpoint is, well, we're the ones doing the directing, but our job is to place the order and then let the universal manager do the part. So the question is, who's initiating here? Is it us or is it the universal manager? And that's really what you were responding to. And I still think it's a good topic because there are different viewpoints on this one. And you talk to, 5 different people about the law of attraction. You look at 5 different answers on it. I mean, for myself, like I was telling Tom on Friday, for myself, I think that we individuals are the initiators. And I think we do it through the thoughts and feelings and ideas and conversations and so forth that we put out on a daily basis. And then the universe, I see the universe as responding to that, not necessarily so much in terms of the universe being this intelligent being. Well, hello there.
Did you hear that?
Oh, yeah, that's pretty loud. We noticed that one. We noticed the car. We noticed the dog.
Okay. Yes, well, that's Middletown for you.
That's Middletown, yeah. Well, that's what happens when you're also the director of a cultural arts center and you have to be there to do other things while you're doing a podcast, which is perfectly understandable.
Yes, that's right. I'm supervising the installation of an art project as we speak.
You're a multitasker is what you are.
Yes, I am. Show me a woman who isn't.
Okay.
Just ask Louise.
Ask Louise. Oh,
Louise,
okay.
do you ever multitask?
Oh, that's funny.
Oh goodness. But yeah, but I like the topic, and I think that of course there's no real way of knowing an absolute answer. For me, I I believe that before we came into this lifetime, we set out a plan. We created a plan, and I think it was quite an elaborate plan. And I'm really impressed with the way the universe is um, it's so well orchestrated and so not regimented, but planned. I think planned is the word I'm looking for because I think we come up with a plan for our life, and then I think we set it about following the plan, and I think that our higher self guides us and leads us and nudges us toward that plan. But because we have free will, excuse me, in every moment, we are getting to decide, are we going to follow that nudge or not follow that nudge? And so in every moment, the universe is responding to our thoughts and feelings and emotions and mainly our vibratory state. So even though the universe, or rather our higher selves, are guiding us from within, I think that what we see around us manifesting is actually the result of our own thoughts, emotion, feelings, and vibratory state to which the universe is responding through the law of attraction.
Okay. So you mentioned a plan, predating our appearance here on the earth in this incarnation. Where does that plan fit into it?
Uh, well, I think that what do you mean by where does that fit into it? I think that we're living that plan, or at
Okay.
least we're living part of that plan. I mean, it's like kind of like a blueprint that we lay out for ourselves.
Okay.
And I think that our spirit guides and our relatives and, a lot of people, if I can use that word, on the other side are helping us determine what we want to accomplish in this lifetime. So we create this blueprint for our lives. We put in it people and circumstances. We put in the criteria for who we want to be born to, who are our parents, what country are we going to be born into? Are we going to be rich or poor, black or white? Are we going to have this circumstance in our life? Oh, at age 25, I'm going to have a car accident, and I'm going to break my leg, and that's going to give me the opportunity to work with this person and learn that, and so you put all these circumstances and things in your life. And so I do think that the universe has a hand in what happens to us. And in fact, I can tell you uh, a very important story that happened in my life that asked me to wonder that exact question.
Hmm.
And I can tell you how I resolved the answer to that in a minute.
Okay.
But once you create that blueprint for your life, then you come down into this lifetime and you forget it all. And the veil comes up and you forget it all.
And why do you
So
think
now
that
you're
is, by
living
the way? Before you skip that part, because I think it's a key part right there. Why do you think that we set it up to forget?
Well, you have to, because if you don't, then there's nothing you can learn. If you already know everything about the game, if you already understand everything about why you're here and all that stuff, then there's no potential for learning. There's no ability to try to figure out the contrast of life and experience from the contrast of life if you already understand it all. So you have to put the veil on. Otherwise, we would just know too much, and it would just confuse the hell out of us, I think. you know.
Okay. But
So
doesn't
I
that
think
like beg
that's
the question though? I mean, because if the purpose is to come here to learn something, but we already knew it before we got here, then why are we learning it?
excuse me. Well, it's not that we're here to actually learn something that we already knew, but it's kind of like, I think, experiencing something that you can't experience on the other side until you come here and experience the contrast of it all. And you have to be fully immersed in it, otherwise you won't believe it, and you won't allow yourself to actually feel it.
Okay.
So it's experiencing that we get to do here on this planet. And it's also creating ourselves. I like Neil Donald Walsh's version of, we're here to create ourselves anew in each and every moment, becoming the grandest version of the greatest vision we ever held of who we are. And
Okay.
you could say that's part of our reason for being here on Earth. So if you kind of knew everything that we knew on the other side, it would just sort of not allow you to really fully engage in this process called life here on Earth.
Okay. Well,
So
that's interesting.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I completely buy into it, but I've heard a lot of similar stuff, and I mean, there is a certain piece of me that wonders, did I come here to set up certain events to happen a certain way? So I mean, it's not like that doesn't resonate at all. But by the same token, there are parts that I'm not sure I totally buy into it, and I think part of it comes down to this. Let's go to a metaphor, the metaphor of the human body. Here in my human body, I'm pretty much the dominant life form in my own human body, and yet my body is made up of, I'm not sure how many millions, billions of cells, right? And according to what we've been told, each of those cells is intelligent. Each one of those cells is conscious. Each one of those cells is basically, in many ways, a separate living being. So here I have this body that's made up of all these different living beings, and yet I am the dominant force. So in a sense, I'm kind of like, if you don't mind that I'm stretching the metaphor a little bit, I'm kind of like the god of my own body in that sense.
That's right. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it kind of also makes sense for somebody to say, well, just as that's the case, so also we are part of the universal stream of source energy, and that source energy also has a larger consciousness. And I say, okay, well, yeah, I can see the metaphor, but I'm not 100% convinced of that. I'm not convinced that it actually is true. It may be true. I can't say that it is, and I can't say that it isn't. I'm just not 100% convinced of it. And
so I lost you on what you're not convinced of.
I'm not convinced that there's a God, in the sense of a single consciousness that is made up of all of source energy. I think there's a God in the sense of there being source energy. I'm just not sure that there's a single consciousness there. I think there's a lot of consciousnesses.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's, and I'm not gonna argue that point, because I certainly don't know. I can tell you what I believe, but even my own beliefs, I question myself sometimes as I uncover more teachings and hear more, books or whatever. And and so I always go with I say, well, I can accept that the possibility of that being true exists.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So there's a possibility of that.
I agree. Yeah.
So I heard one of the teachers say that God was this huge energy mass, and it wanted to experience and to know itself more fully. So it exploded into what some would call the Big Bang Theory, and it created all these sparks, which became human souls and all the living things that we see on this planet, and even other planets. It became all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all part of that same energy. And that's why we're all connected. That's why we all have that. That's why we're all part of the same one. And yet I personally believe that there's a consciousness that is, that we equate to a female goddess, and there's a consciousness that we equate to a male goddess, and each of them has different strengths. And the female goddess, in my opinion, from what I've learned and what I believe, is in charge of emotions, and is actually the one that answers prayers, because she's all about creativity and emotions. She's the ones for the emotions. And whereas the male god is like the guy that keeps everything in place. He's the stability.
I love it. That's funny.
So anyway, whether there's one God or many gods or many consciousnesses or one consciousness, I do think that when Abraham refers to source, and when I think about that, I do think of it as a collective body of entities who know our life plan, who know the purpose for each and every one of us coming to planet Earth, and lovingly guides us toward the individual plan that we each have decided upon for ourselves.
Okay. I mean, what you were saying is certainly something I've heard various incarnations of, various versions of, and it's certainly
Right.
very consistent with a lot of stuff I've heard. So I can agree with that much. I'm just not 100% sure myself. Because from my perspective, what I can see it is, I can see it that I certainly buy into the idea of source energy. And I buy into the idea that source energy is filled with uncounted numbers of individuals. I mean, we're all like droplets in the overall stream of source energy, so to speak. And then that makes some sense to me.
Yeah.
I like that. I can kind of get my mind around that pretty easily. So that's where I can be on the same page, so to speak, as the people who argue for the God energy, the God sourceness. I mean, I can go that far with it. That part works for me. I'm just not sure if I can go the whole way. That's all.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. It's okay. And we're all trying to just figure this thing out as we go day by day. And I think that for me, what's important is, are you making your life work for you? And are you accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish? And if you want to learn more, learn. If you want to explore. If you want to be miserable, be miserable. If you want to complain all day long, if that's what makes you feel good, go ahead. Just don't do it in my neighborhood.
Okay.
Don't do it around me.
Well, we'll have to make sure. Make a note.
I tell Mike sometimes. Right. Make a note. Don't complain around Anne Marie. I'll give you 16 seconds and that's it.
16, yeah, not 17, right? Because 17, that starts to manifest something. I got it.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll say to Mike, he'll be talking about what is, and I don't like this, or, I'm not where I want to be. And I go, okay, time's up. And he looks at me sometimes, he goes, you have no compassion. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
I'm sorry.
Well, we do. We love to have misery as company, right? Misery loves company. That's the cliche. And when we're feeling miserable, we want other people to feel miserable too, because then it feels better, right? Well, not really, but we think so.
Yeah, we think so. Yeah. We know that we're just not alone. It's like, we don't want to be alone. We really don't want to be alone in our thoughts or in anything, I think. We don't like being alone. Although I can't say that entirely, because some people do like to be alone. But
well, they're at least convinced that they want to be alone. Yeah. I'm not. See,
right.
My own idea about why we're here is, I don't know that there's any given plan before I got here. Maybe there is, but I'm not automatically buying into that. I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying I don't buy into it necessarily. But regardless of that,
well,
what I do think.
Let me tell you a story then.
Well, before you tell the story, let me just.
You
finish.
go ahead. Yeah.
Let me just finish what I was going to say. What I do think is that my primary purpose here, I won't even speak for anybody else. My primary purpose here is to enjoy life. And if I learn something along the way, great. But that's secondary. Primary is I'm here to enjoy life. And I like saying that, because until I heard and read Abraham Hicks, I never heard anybody who said that was the case. That's what life was for. Life was here to be enjoyed. Abraham was the first one who said that. And when they said it, it resonated so strongly with me that I realized, first of all, I'd been kind of burying it all my life. And second of all, I realized how much I wanted to make it my credo, so to speak. So I decided at that point, from now on, I am declaring with my loudest voice, I am here to enjoy life. That's my primary purpose for being here. So
good for you.
That's where I come from. So go ahead, tell me your story.
Good for you. So before I tell you the story, let me tell you my theory about why Abraham says that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, I think that there have been many teachers who have come to planet Earth to teach us how to live a better life, how to love each other and the importance of loving each other and all that. I think Jesus was one of those teachers, Muhammad, Buddha. I think all these people came to earth to teach us. And everybody had their own bent. Everybody had their own particular focus. And I think Abraham, as a group of teachers on the other side, if you will, or in the invisible plane, I think their particular focus is to help us get our stuff. And so they know that in order to get your stuff and in order to understand the law of attraction and be able to deliberately create, not just creating by default, but deliberately create, and thus be able to determine what it is we want to create and learn how to manifest that, they realize that the best way to do that is to be happy. So she's going to teach, or I should say they are going to teach, to be happy, to be joyful. And let's face it, if you're joyful and you're living a happy life, what's better than that?
That's true.
So no matter what's happening, or no matter what religion it is going on in your head, or no matter what problems are happening, if you can be happy, then you're ultimately going to figure out the problems in your life, and you're going to work things out, and things are going to happen for you. And the universe is going to be able to help you if you're staying happy and positive and accepting and allowing. You know, if you're doing all those things that they talk about is important to do, then you're going to be successful at achieving your goals and manifesting what it is you want. So I think that's why they say the purpose of life is for joy, because that's their focus. And they know that we're all here trying to get stuff. We're trying to get a lover. We're trying to get a car. We're trying to get a job. We're trying to get healthy. I mean, that's what we're doing here. Even though you could say that the focus of life is 101 other things, we all still do that every single day. Mm-hmm. And so I do think that being joyful and being happy is the biggest key to life. And, another key to life would be gratitude. But still, if you're joyful, I do think that's really, really super important.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's my theory on why they say that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a reasonable theory. Couple thoughts that occurred to me. First thought that occurred to me is chicken or egg. Is Abraham's primary message to be joyful, or is Abraham's primary message, here's how to get your stuff? I mean, I would say us humans, we want to get the stuff. I think that's the hook, so to speak. That's what draws us in. Is that what Abraham has in mind? Mm-hmm. You know, there's an interesting thing about Abraham. We know that Abraham is a collective, so to speak, or a collection of non-physical beings. And we also know that just as in the physical world, non-physical beings are quite different. They aren't uniform. You know, it's just like it seems like that the cells of our body are uniform, but they're really not. We as humans can even identify this kind of cell as a nerve cell and that kind of cell as a blood cell and so forth. So we even have certain areas that we can divide up. But I kind of suspect that if we were able to have a better sense of how the conscious life of a cell is, I think we'd realize that even cells that are of the same type, like white blood cells, they aren't all the same. I think we'd find that they were all different identities, and that each of them contributes slightly differently in the way that they interact with the rest of the cells in our bodies and with invaders and whatever else. I think that's really one of the most important things to remember about Abraham. I mean, you notice it in a lot of the ways that messages are presented. Like if you watch workshops on YouTube, or if you're subscribed to one of the plans that Abraham Hicks offers, you notice that on any given day, Abraham interacts with any given person in the hot seat in a different way. And I think it's because there are different entities who have the mic. I mean, at any given time, only one person... and only one non-physical person can, so to speak, have the mic on the other side. And so I think we get a different person each time. And the different person on the other side is whoever that group feels is going to be the best response for the person who's in the hot seat. And you actually see it. There are times when Abraham is perhaps a little bit harsher, and other times when Abraham is more gentle. Sometimes when Abraham is being happier, more joyful. Sometimes Abraham is cracking jokes. It's almost like there are different people each time playing Abraham.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I never thought about it that way. I'm going to have to really look at it. For me, I always thought it was a collection of thoughts going into like one thing and it melding out, kind of like you throw all the ingredients into a pot, you stir it up and bake it, and out comes a brownie. And, you know, I kind of looked at it like that as opposed to particular individual ones. But you absolutely could be right. I mean, that would explain a lot of things. So,
in fact, Esther,
that's
since Jerry Hicks has passed, Jerry is now one of the people who comes through as Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that really interesting because whenever that happens, Esther says, that was Jerry, by the way. And I love that.
Yeah. That's funny. So the story that I'm about to tell you, it's, well, it just happened, and it baffled me for a long time. And so I was married years ago to a man who would often predict the future, and he would tell me things, and sure enough, they would happen. Mm-hmm. And so I came to understand that, and not everything that he said would happen happened, but too many things happened that I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't just say, "Oh, you're full of baloney."
Sure.
Too many things came true,
right?
And he would talk about in the future. So I had to pay attention, and so he told me when my kids were little. I have 3 kids, and he told me when my kids were little that something was really bad was going to happen when a babysitter was watching our kids. So he didn't want me to get babysitters.
Mm.
So as a result, we used my parents a lot. We used friends, you know, adult friends, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't go out sometimes. And then as soon as my oldest daughter was old enough, we had her be a babysitter. But this one particular day, and that went on for a while. And then one particular day, my oldest daughter was out of town with my ex-husband. Actually, they went actually to to a funeral down in Florida. They were at a funeral, so they were gone, and they were gone for several days. And I had sort of worn out my friends, and I said, well, maybe I'll just leave them home alone after school today. I mean, they were old enough where they could have stayed home alone after school. I think they were not really old enough, but they were, for an hour or two. I think they were 7 and 9, something like that. It was not really a good idea. But so anyway, I'm in the shower that morning, and I hear a story on the news, and I don't usually listen to the news, but I happened to turn the news on, and they tell the story about how this woman was put in jail because she left her kids home alone.
Oh dear.
And her kids were much younger. They were like 2 and 3 or something like that. I was like, okay, I am not leaving my kids home alone. I have to find somebody to babysit, And then the idea came to me, and I said, oh, remember when you were at church, like a long time ago, you bought a certificate for a babysitter. So why don't you pull that out? I said, okay, I'm going to pull that certificate out, and I'm going to look at the number. I'm going to call the number, and if it works out fine, then I know it was meant to be, and I'll get this babysitter. So I called the number, and lo and behold, the woman answers. She says, oh yeah, that's my daughter. Yeah, she's going to be home after school today, so we can do that. I'll bring her over, and no problem. So it all worked out really beautifully. So I'm like, okay, thinking this is great. The universe is helping me line up the babysitter, so I don't have to worry about it or anything. And I actually had sort of forgotten about his prediction. I just knew that I didn't want to leave my kids home alone that day. So I figured I was doing the right thing, and it felt all good.
Sure.
Until I got home from work that day. And I got home from work, and there's my son on the couch. And I said, what happened? Oh, well, the babysitter was spinning him around on the front yard and let go, and he wasn't ready, and he rolled and kind of hit the hill, and it wound up giving him a fracture in his bone, and he fractured his leg.
Ouch. And
it turned into this big, long thing, where because it was a fracture, the Department of Children and Families was involved because they thought, they had to investigate to see if any wrongdoing happened. And
Oh,
all this
jeez.
stuff. It was on and on and on. So my husband called me that night, and actually we had to go pick him up at the airport, and he saw my son with the cast on his foot, and it was like, it was not a good scene. But anyway, so here I am trying to prevent this thing from happening for a long time, preventing this thing from happening that he had said was going to happen. And here it was, it happened. And I'm saying to the universe, like, God, I tried so hard to prevent that from happening. And this morning, it seemed like everything told me to do this, to call that girl and to get that babysitter. And, I felt like I was doing the right thing. So why did this happen? I don't understand. Why did this happen? It seemed like it had to happen. It seemed like it was fate. It seemed like this was just meant to happen. And why, when I tried so hard to prevent it? So not long after that, I picked up a book. You know how it is when books just show up and you just know you're supposed to read them. And I picked up this book by Sylvia Browne. And that's where I learned about the blueprint for life, or your contract for life, where we sit down on the other side and we make a plan, and we actually come up with a plan for our life according to what it is we want to accomplish. And we put instances like breaking a leg in our life path. And that's why I say, even though I believe that we have free will and the law of attraction follows our emotional state and our vibratory state, and things happen because of that, I also believe that the universe, the collective consciousness on the other side, has a hand in it all. And it nudges us toward our path. It nudges us and guides us toward fulfilling that path and for staying on that contract, that plan. But like Tom was saying on Friday, I think it's really important that we trust that everything that happens is part of that bigger plan, and it's okay. And it's just okay, and lovingly we embrace whatever happens. Whether it's good or bad, we embrace what happens with love. And that's the best way to get through everything. There you have it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I can follow that. I'm not sure what I think about it, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that you've got a very coherent story, and it holds together, and the conclusion is very understandable. So yeah, I mean that's certainly a viable possibility. It could certainly be that way.
All right.
I just don't know. I mean, for me,
right.
I had a few thoughts that occurred to me while you were telling the story. One thought that occurred to me is you were trying desperately to prevent something from happening. That to me is a surefire way to make it happen. To try to prevent something from happening.
Well, there's that too, isn't that? Isn't that part of the way? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, yeah. There is a flip side to it, because it can work either way. It just depends on how you're feeling about it. Like the flip side would be, say, you hear that there's rain in the forecast, so you bring an umbrella, and by bringing an umbrella, you know it's not going to rain, right? Because you carry the umbrella, so of course you're not going to need the umbrella. If you'd forgotten the umbrella, then it would rain. But as long as you brought the umbrella, it's not going to rain. It depends on how you really think and feel about it. If you really buy into that idea, then guess what? You're right, because you're influencing the universe in that direction. If you don't really buy into it, then guess what? You're right. You're influencing the universe in that direction. It just depends on what you really believe about it. I mean, that's what I think about when I hear your story. It really just depended on what you thought about it. You thought that there was a very good chance that your husband was right. You were trying very hard to make sure it didn't happen, and it happened. And my reaction is, yeah, that's exactly right. You got exactly what you put out there.
Right. Although that particular day, I wasn't really thinking about, oh, you can't get a babysitter because something bad's going to happen with the babysitter. I was thinking about, I can't leave my kids home alone, because that was the message that I got in the shower was, don't leave your kids home alone. You have to get somebody to watch them. So it's important that you get a babysitter. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't thinking about the negative side of something bad happening. I was thinking I was doing something good by, making sure that they were taken care of.
I think it's important to remember something
Yeah.
that Wendy has reinforced for me a number of times, which is another word for the law of attraction is momentum. That when we're thinking about something and doing it more regularly and we're putting energy into it on a regular basis, we're building a momentum for something. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily have to have thought about or built the momentum of something today for it to show up today. You could have been building it up over the previous months and years, and you just didn't even think about it today, and then it showed up today. Doesn't mean the momentum wasn't built
Right,
up. It
right, right.
was. It's just that it didn't happen to show up
Right.
until today when you kind of forgot about it. And kind of forgetting about it,
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
that actually makes sense because forgetting about it is a way to let go of resistance. So now all of a sudden the thing can show
Right.
up. So I can frame it
Right.
that way and make some sense out of it that kind of resonates with me. I also
Mm-hmm.
think about it.
No, I see that. I see your point there, and I totally agree with you there. Yeah.
Okay. I can also see how this is a point that I've tried to make a few times and sometimes futilely with some of the other co-hosts. I'm not sure they totally buy into it, but I really think it's true. It's not like we live in a universe or in a life for that matter, where we have a single thread of thought that's always going on at one time. And so you can always just follow that thread to see, how's it meander, how's it change, and that's going to show you what's going to happen in your life. Because the simple fact is, we go through a day and we have, I forget what science says, 65,000 thoughts in a day. Some of them last, a few seconds, so they don't really manifest anything. Others turn into more coherent and regular patterns of thought, so they start building momentum. But we don't have just one. We have a lot of them that go on, and they kind of all mix and match and interweave like threads that all kind of weave up into this great big knot. So you have the universal knot, right? The universal knot of all these different threads that are all tangled together, and that's why I think it can actually be kind of almost close to impossible in most cases to figure out what thread led to this event that led to that event that led to that conclusion, because there's so many threads in there, like who knows which one it was. Sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes we're lucky. Sometimes we can see very clearly what the thread is, but a lot of the time we don't know. So I look at a story like what you told, and there was a definite momentum thing going on there, but is it the only momentum in your life? No, there's a lot of others too. What role did they play? God only knows. I mean, there's just too many of them for us to keep track of. Which is why I'm really glad that there's a universal manager to keep track of all that, because I sure can.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I don't want to have to keep track of that.
But it also complicates our ability to, figure all that stuff out. So is there a universal plan there? Could be. I don't know. I can't see what's going on in all the threads. I just can't tell you. It's quite possible that there is one. Does it mean that there's not one? Nope, I can't tell you that one either. I don't know what's going on in all the threads. And I think that's really where, we talk about the veil of life, not remembering what happened and so forth. I think that's what the real veil is. There's just too many darn threads for us to keep track of.
Well, maybe.
At some point your mind just kind of boggles, like, I can't handle that anymore. You've given me too much data. Forget it. I'm done. Let's take a coffee break.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Well, yeah. Well, that's interesting. The veil too. Abraham talks about the veil. Oh no, maybe it wasn't Abraham. I think it was Dolores Cannon. Have you ever listened to Dolores Cannon?
No, I don't think I know that name. No.
Interesting lady I've been listening to lately. And anyway, she talks about the veil that it goes on. When you sleep, the veil is lifted. Mm-hmm. And you cross over to the other side. Your mind crosses over to the other side, and you're in that non-physical world. And then when you wake up, and the veil again is sort of dropped. And that's why it's so hard to recall our dreams sometimes, because it's on the other side of the veil. Our dreams are on the other side of the veil.
Okay.
So this veil thing is a very interesting thing. I want to learn more about the veil and how it is that we. Sometimes I think I want to learn more about dreams, and some things I don't want to. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I know our time is winding up here, and
Well, we
you
got a few
probably
minutes
have some
left.
things to tell our listeners, don't
Yeah,
you?
we do. We do need to get a few messages in there. First one to get in, and most important of all, if you're not yet a subscriber, please become one. You can tell what kind of fun we have on these podcasts, and they're all different because we got all these different personalities who are involved from one episode to the next. So I mean, there's never a dull moment. And besides, how many places can you listen to a podcast where there's construction going on in the background? I tell you, this is like a rare thing. So.
You're going to kick me off the show, aren't you?
No. That's just that adds spice. It adds flavor. It makes it interesting. No, but seriously, the best thing to do is just become a subscriber because that way all of the great episodes come right to your smartphone, and there are 45 of them a month. I mean, we're doing 11 plus. 11 every week, and there's more than 4 weeks in a month. There's like 2, 3, 4 days more in a month than 28 days, depending on which month you're in. Well, that means on average about 45 episodes a month. And 45 episodes, all of them are coming right to your smartphone when you subscribe automatically, so you can play them anytime you want to. So just go to the homepage at loatoday.net. You'll see all the instructions there for how to become a subscriber. You can also do it just through your iPhone or your Android phone. In the iPhone, go to your podcast software that's built right in. And open that up, do a little search on LOA Today. Boom, there we are. We'll pop right in. You can subscribe, and you got it. On an Android phone, they usually don't come with a built-in podcast software, but that's what the Play Store is for. You go to the Play Store, and you can find a podcast app. And there are a bunch of them out there. I mean, we list 2 or 3 of them on our website that are free ones, but there are a lot of them you can choose from. Pick whatever one you want, and then install it. And once you've installed it, then use the search built into that to search for LOA Today, and bang, you'll find us, and you can subscribe and become a subscriber that way. But either way you do it, make sure you become a subscriber. Now, for those of you who are already subscribers and maybe have been subscribing for quite some time, we're asking you to put something out on social media. Whatever your favorite channel is, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever you use, doesn't matter. Just put something out that includes the phrase loatoday.net, because that helps to spread the word to not just people you know of, but because of the way social media connects everybody together, it sends out to people who you don't even know, who don't know about LOA Today. And let's be honest, this is a great show. This is a show that people really need to have because there aren't all that many positive shows in life. So do people a favor, people you don't even know, help them to find LOA Today just by posting about it on your social media. So those are the 2 biggest messages. Also, we want to encourage you, for any of these shows, if you want to call in and talk to us, tell us that we're full of it, that's fine too. Share some insight that you have. Maybe you have a manifestation you want to tell about. Maybe you just want to share a win for the day. Or maybe you just want to say, hey, I like being a fan and I wanted to say hello sometime. Hey, we love any of those reasons for calling in. All the instructions are right there on the homepage at loatoday.net, and you can call in. And boy, I can tell you, Anne-Marie, when that happens, it's so much fun having somebody call in. I mean, it's a blast. Yeah. It's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I've been your caller in.
You have been,
I
yes.
Attest to that. It's fun, yeah. It is. Hey, listen, before we sign off, I want to thank you for having me on, and I want to invite you down to see the art project that we're installing right now.
What is this art project? You were telling me.
His friend John.
You were telling me before the
you
show,
gotta
but
come see it.
Oh, you're not even going to give me a clue, huh? Oh, okay.
Well, it's at the Buttonwood Tree. It's at the Buttonwood Tree, which is 605 Main Street, Middletown. And for anybody who wants to find out more about the Buttonwood Tree, you can go online to buttonwood.org and catch our shows or catch our programs and see what's happening, and then come down to 605 Main and see the art project that we're installing tonight.
Yeah, if you're anywhere near Connecticut, Middletown, Connecticut is the place to be. I mean, it is the most amazing thing, the Buttonwood Tree. So definitely make a point to go there. Really, really good. Just one last thought I want to throw in about the topic that we were discussing today, because it was a fascinating topic, and there's probably a lot more we could talk about. But I think that the biggest takeaway for me is there are so many ways to look at this stuff. Perspective is everything. Mm-hmm. And I just continue to be amazed at all the different ways that perspective brings us different understandings of how source energy works, how the law of attraction works, how, what's the nature of God, what's the nature of the universe, who's in control. I mean, the perspectives are endless, and I love them. And they're talk about the spice in life. They're the spice of life, I think. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And even time changes our own perspective.
It really does.
And all we learn is, it's so fascinating. I just love life. I think it's so fascinating. So
I agree. Fun. Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks for doing the show. I look forward to talking to you again next week. Yeah,
thank you. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoy it. So
all right.
Thank you. And keep being happy. Keep finding the joy.
Absolutely. And we hope that you'll continue to find the joy with us by joining us for every episode here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Yes.